Hi everyone, Heather here from CAN. Thank you for joining us today for our 8th video in this series of weekly virtual fireside chats with Michael Funk from CDE. You can find all the fireside chats in our COVID-19 Resource Center on the CAN website and on our YouTube channel. We'll throw links up at the end for those. This week joining us, we have Jen Dietrich from the California Afterschool Advocacy Alliance, also known as CA3. To talk about the governor's May revised budget that was released just last Thursday and the potential impacts for expanded learning in California. Jen has also invited a couple CA3 members to speak to the impacts at a programmatic level. So welcome Jen, Malia, and Mike. Excited to have you here today. And Michael, before we jump in, I'm hoping you can walk us through at the state level, the basics of what the governor's May revise means for expanded learning programs in California.
Yeah, quickly so we can get to our guests. Thank you, three of you, for joining us today. So the governor's May revision, of course, we knew it wasn't going to be good news. And this week, there was the Assembly Education Budget Committee met, and a lot of testimony, a lot of preparation for that. So there's a $100 million proposed cut to ACEs. The first thing I want to say is it is a proposal. Anything in the governor's May revise is a proposal. Nothing is set in stone. There's quite a bit of time ahead of us in terms of both Assembly and Senate and negotiations. So that's the first thing I want you all to know, because immediately when that came out, there was a flood of questions. I know a lot of anxiety in the system. What does this mean? Does this mean my grant's going to get cut? What about my job? What about my work? So I want to just say a couple things. The $100 million was the gains that we made in the last 3 years through the budgetary process to increase the rate. So 3 years ago, in 17-18, through the budget process and the advocacy around the state added $50 million to the ACES fund solely for the purpose of increasing the state rate. So the rate increased from $7.50 to $8.19 per child per day. Last year, another $50 million went into the budget, also solely dedicated to the rate. None of that money went to the state operations. None of it went for the larger infrastructure, for the system of support for expanded learning. It all went to programs, all for the rate. And that moved the rate from $8.19 to $8.88. And so what we knew before the May revision was that this money was not protected under Prop 49. I'm not going to get deeply into the weeds, but Prop 49, passed in 2002, triggered the money actually started to flow in 2006, has very precise provisions about when that money can be cut or not. And it has to do with Prop 98 going into a Test 3 situation, which it's never done and didn't go into Test 3 this year. So the $550 million of Prop 49 funding that's now part of Prop 98 was not touched. So, but the $100 million we knew was vulnerable, and in fact it was cut. And in the Assembly hearing, all the Assembly members, bipartisan, were challenging the notion of this cut when expanded learning is going to be needed more than ever moving forward. And that's what our panelists are going to talk about. But my concern is that when challenged by elected officials, the Department of Finance in the testimony said, we're not, the question was, what happens when children can't go to the after-school programs? Where are they going to go? And the Department of Finance responded, we're not cutting access, which means slots. We're expecting to revert the rate back to $8.88 to $7.50. We know that will be catastrophic and cause a collapse. We have calculated that if the rate stays at $8.88 and the $100 million cut moves through, we're going to lose 62,553 slots. That's a lot. It's a lot of kids. But if the rate goes down to $7.50, there will be a catastrophic collapse of many agencies, and we're going to lose far more slots. And what I do know from talking to very influential progressive education leaders talking about the reopening of schools in the fall. They are all saying in unity, we need expanded learning. We need expanded learning more than ever. And I'm saying expanded learning more than just after school, because we don't know if after school as a time of day, as a time slot, as a time and place will be what exists. But we do know that our amazing humans in expanded learning are incredibly necessary for the successful reopening of school and the support of our kids. So to that end, I think that's enough of a base. So, but in the worst case of scenario, if the rate drops or the slots lose, we're not cutting individual grants. There might be reductions in the grant amount or reductions in the slot. Stay tuned for the specifics. All that has to be worked out. But I'll stop there and let's turn it over to our guest, Heather.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And Jen, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. So if you want to start first just by explaining a little bit about what CA3 is, and then kind of going into more detail about the budget proposal and impacts to our programs and how CA3 is responding.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having us today. So CA3 is a statewide coalition of expanded learning providers and advocacy organizations that represent the interests of children and families that count on publicly funded after-school and summer programs. We, as Michael said, we led the Save After School campaign, and in total secured $100 million, and now it's proposed to be cut. And what I would add, what Michael said, is that when we're talking to the governor and legislators and school leaders and families about what the critical needs are right now, they all agree we need to think about kids and how they get meals, learning loss, physical, social, and emotional needs, and providing a safe place so parents can go back to work. And expanded learning programs already do those things and do them well. But with a 15% cut, programs can't do this work. And we understand that it's tough right now, but in particular, this cut will be devastating to the children and families that have been hit hardest during this crisis. And with that said, I want to thank my fellow CA3 members from the California Teaching Fellows Foundation for joining today. And in better days, I've been lucky to travel with them to the Capitol and join in their meetings, and they do a wonderful job really illustrating what is at risk right now. So Malia, if we can start with you, can you tell us a bit more about the California Teaching Fellows Foundation, and how have you been responding and supporting the community during this time?
Hi everyone. Jen, Heather, Michael, thank you so much for having us today. It's such a pleasure to be here. My name is Malia Villarreal with the California Teaching Fellows Foundation, and we're a nonprofit based out of Fresno, California. And we employ 2,000 college students to work in Title I K through 12 after school and expanded learning programs in Merced, Madera, Fresno, Tulare, and Kings County. So we get to work with urban communities like Fresno, but we also work with very rural communities that maybe have just PO boxes and one stop sign in their town. And so what we do is we recruit college students who are passionate about making a difference in their community, and we train them up to serve these students who are in historically underserved communities and a lot of times don't have access to the necessary resources to be successful. And so, fast forward to COVID-19, we will always remember the infamous Friday, March 13th, when the light was switched and schools were closed and everyone scrambled. But the really neat thing about our workforce is that they're passionate, they were ready to go, they wanted to jump in any way possible, and they were well prepared and trained to do so. So a couple of examples of what we've been able to do during COVID-19 is, we've been providing childcare for essential workers in some of our communities, which is such a brave thing to go in there, but that they've been doing and been handling it well. We have a small rural community who, surprisingly enough, their head of food services was tested positive for COVID-19 early on, and their whole team had to be quarantined. So overnight, our team mobilized in that community, and they stepped in to fill that critical role of serving meals in that community. Another example for those of you who worked with older youth, or if you have an older youth in your home, that they've completely disconnected, right? They're checked out. And so some of our teaching fellows have been giving them calls to our high school students in alternative high schools saying, how are you doing? What can we help you with? What are your needs? And, our teaching fellows come from these neighborhoods. They've built that rapport. They've built those relationships because we don't know what homes they're going back to, right? Are they taking care of brothers and sisters? Do they have meals? Are they hungry? Are they in in an abusive situation, right? We want to make sure that they're not going in the wrong direction and that they're making smart choices during this time. So those are a couple of examples of what we've been able to do during this time. And, being an only parent myself, I know what it's like to have to teach my 9-year-old son while trying to balance, working at home and being worried about what is the financial future of my family, or what does the future look like. And, I cannot imagine a time when we go back to school, right? Families are finally going back to work. They're worried about their finances. They're worried about losing their homes. They can't even imagine where their kids are going to go after school, let alone if their kids are only going to school 2 days a week, right? Before COVID even happened, we had parents crying. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes. Parents would call crying, begging us to allow their student in an after school program because they finally landed that full-time job with benefits that can completely change their family tree. And they can't afford childcare yet, or they can't afford to take a day off because they'll lose their job, right? And what's going to happen when we transition back to this, COVID-19, kids are only going to school maybe 2 days a week. I can't even imagine, right? And K through 12 does a phenomenal job of serving our students and serving our kids with such a lean budget, but they can't do it alone, right? There's so much trauma that happened in every single household that there's no way that they're going to be able to meet the needs of our whole community. And it's going to take a village to get us back on track and to get everyone back to speed so that way we can transition back. Right? We're going to need collaboration with different CBOs and different expanded learning programs. And honestly, I don't know any other workforce or infrastructure that is used to these types of situations that's ready to go. We always say fired up and ready to go in our field, right? But they're trained in this, right? They're used to working with students who've been in these trauma persistent environments for a long time. So they're well equipped, they're trained, they're ready to go. They can mobilize overnight, and we know how to meet the needs of individual communities because that's what we do, right? And so I can't imagine if this infrastructure falls apart, right? We don't want to lose something that is so critical to our Central Valley, to our community, and to our economy so our families can stay working. So anyway, that's just a little bit about what we've been doing. Happy to give more detail if you'd like.
Wow. Amen, sister. Preach it. I mean, that you articulated so well what I've been trying to communicate to policymakers, what is actually happening out there. And the very fact that we're literally supporting the well-being of families and transforming the experience for so many who are facing so many challenges. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you're doing as a single parent with your 9-year-old at home as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Malia. Mike, can you tell us more about what this specifically means for the teaching fellows and the students in your community?
Jen, yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to do so. And first, Michael and Heather, thanks so much for this Fireside Chat, this forum, and bringing us together and this connectiveness. We really appreciate it. And Jen, thanks so much for all the hard work at CA3. And gosh, Malia, so proud to work alongside you and be on your team. Getting onto the budget, right now, our first priority is to figure out how to best safely return staff and students to programs as soon as possible. From a budget perspective, we're extremely concerned about the state's budget deficit, right? And this proposed $100 million cut to after-school funding. At CTFF, we view budget as permission to spend, right, in certain categories. And so years of experience tells us that if we want to have high quality expanded learning programs for our community, we need to do well in 3 categories. And, first, we must attract, pay, and retain these well-equipped, right, adults with a passion for working with youth who love kids and ideally want to become, future teachers and leaders. And fortunately, we have really great people. Secondly, we've got to provide this quality staff with training and ongoing professional development to ensure their success. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the old adage, right? You've got to feed the staff so they don't eat the kids. And lastly, there's got to be some level of site human and programmatic support, right? And so from a budget standpoint, today's rate, $8.88 per student per day, we're barely able to keep up with the infrastructure in place given this escalation of minimum wage. And if we're being asked to step back to $7.50 per student per day, there's no word for it. It's devastating, right? It's a scorched earth scenario. And so to kind of walk back through that framework, $7.50 per student per day, it immediately moves us backwards and forces us to be a minimum wage employer. And this absolutely fires me up. This is not minimum wage work, and these are not minimum wage positions. And the challenges just begin to cascade from here, right? It cripples our ability to attract and retain the types of role models and leaders that our students need right now more than ever. It removes our ability to equip staff with the tools and training required to help communities recover and heal from this trauma and stress and fear that's impacted the entire planet at this point. Supplies budgets, things like technology, basic materials and supplies, enrichment, experiences, right? All these things that are designed to expand students' horizons, those are going to be severely hindered. And not to mention how we're planning on how we ensure for staff and student safety moving forward. A couple other things from a budget standpoint come to mind, right? This real big question mark. How do we, as an agency in a field, how do we find the resources to innovate and plan and prepare for this kind of scenario again, so that we're better equipped to serve students and families virtually? And certainly most unfortunate of all, right, is it's likely going to gravely reduce the number of students and families that we'll be able to serve moving forward, all right? And so, I guess to kind of sum it all up, and having conversations with school districts and budget planning thus far, and it's likely that we're going to be forced to, potentially reduce staff by as much as 20%. And we're calculating at this point that it's likely that we're going to be serving approximately 6,000 fewer students this next year. And these are spots that represent students in some of the Central San Joaquin Valley's most vulnerable populations. So for those of you that know me, I'm a glass half full kind of a person, right? But this proposal, it's absolutely devastating. We're going to continue to work our tails off to save after school funding, and we sure could use everyone's support in this. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you. Articulate, bleak. I believe we're going to win this. I believe that the very stories that you've both told are going to be the compelling reason why our policymakers will do the right thing at a time when families need the support. Everyone's talking about the economy has to open up. In order for this incredibly dark, unprecedented budget reality, $54 billion shortfall in the state, in order for that to open, the economy has to open up. But it's not going to open unless our kids are supported and cared for, and not just watched over in the corner so they're safe. I mean, our children also need to have the kind of experiences that you're both describing by the kind of adults and caring adults you're both describing. So I'll turn it back to Heather before I make some closing comments.
Sure. So obviously a lot of challenges ahead, and we need everyone to get involved. And so, Jen, I'm just going to ask, if people had just a few minutes, what's something they could do to take action? And while you are sharing, I'm going to pull up my screen.
Thank you. So there are two things that can be done quickly and easily. So, and talking about the timeline here, this decision is going to be made very quickly. We're talking about days. We have days to act, not weeks. And so we're asking everyone to text after school to 52886, and this will get you quickly and easily connected to Capitol leaders. You can tell them, what this cut would mean for your program, for your families, and for your community. And the legislature is listening, and it's our duty to tell them that, families and schools and communities won't come back together and heal and grow without expanded learning programs. And this cut is so dire. And so everyone to text, please, so you can contact legislators. And then the second thing is for organizations. If you can sign our coalition letter, go to www.saveafterschool.com, look for our Take Action page, and sign on to a letter. You don't have to be part of CA3 to sign the letter. We're hoping, school districts, COEs, community-based organizations, we hope you can join. And now's the time to do it. We don't have much time.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And yes, please do text after school to 52886. It literally only takes a couple minutes. And so I highly encourage everyone to do that as soon as they see this video. And I just wanted to quickly reiterate, your voices are so important right now during this time, hearing the stories about what you all are doing to serve your communities in this time. So we ask you to share with the California Department of Education what you are doing, what you've been planning to do, how you are engaged in reopening. The link is up there so you can fill out the survey. CAN has been collecting and sharing stories. We hope you participate in that. And if you have more time, also log on to saveafterschool.com and get more details about how you can be an advocate. You can find all of this in our resource center. You can find our other fireside chats. You can send us emails. We just really hope you engage. Your voices are more important now than ever. So yeah, we really encourage you to get involved, even if it's just for a couple minutes. So with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you for closing comments.
Yeah, put that text number back on the screen.
Will do. $52886. If I could make up a jingle and sing it, I would. 52886. I'm not encouraging you to text after school to that number. I am telling you to text after school to that number. If you care about the well-being of children and the future of expanded learning as a critical part of the educational system, text that number. There's no neutral ground here. If you don't text that number and you're able to, if you're able to put your voice out there and you don't, then you're causing harm. Be part of the solution, be part of the action. If your program can do amazing things like Malia described, and you're not, it's not neutral. You're causing harm. Let's do the right thing. Let's lead the way we can lead during this time. This is our time. And as the folks in the Central Valley that we've heard from today and all of you across do every day, let's lead with love to get to learning. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.